And we're going to be talking about Firefly today. So it's the fourth of our Wednesday talks now. So if you haven't already checked, and I think some of you have, number 1 was crow pose. Great, that's perfect. Melly can hear me. Good. Better than the first week. First week you couldn't hear me. Number 2 was side crow pose. Number 3 was arm pressure pose, which is kind of a preparation for what we're doing today, which is Firefly Pose. And the difference between the crow, obviously, and what we're doing today is that crow was tilting ourselves forwards, and Firefly, we have to kind of have that balance of tilting backwards. So we're going to talk about that in a moment. Let's just see who else is arriving. Cool. All right. So let's get started then. People will pop up, and as people pop up, just give me a wave. Tell me where you are and that everything's okay. Got Lucy. Hey, Lucy. Okay, cool. So how I like to think about this practice with arm balances is thinking about how to make ourselves be ready for the shape. So what do I need to open? And I say this every week, so apologies for the repetition. Hey, Lucy. So what has to be open to get into the shape? What has to be strong to be in the shape? And then what do I need to cool down after? Okay, but the most important parts for the conversation today are how do I get into it? What needs to be warm in my preparations? And then what needs to be strong to stay in it. Okay, so I like to think of Firefly as a foundational pose in terms of the arm balances for that going forward experience. Going forward in terms of chest open and broad, spine is nice and long, but actually the hips are sinking backwards. So if you think about crow pose, there's that tilting forward motion and looking forward. But in Firefly, we're looking forward, but actually going back. And it can be different for people in terms of which feels more fearful or fear-inducing. So for me, I'm much more comfortable going back than going forwards. And I know for lots of my friends, it's the other way around. And what we're going to do when we come to look at how to advance Firefly Pose is actually putting going forwards and backwards together. So we're going to look at that as well. Hey guys. Cool. All right. So what needs to be open to be in this shape? Well, we've got to be open in the inner thigh. We've also, in this particular shape, got to be really open through the back of the legs as well. Because if you think about it, the shape is actually a wide leg forward fold. So if I show you from the side, we're literally folding ourselves in two. And then our arms are like this, okay? So this is the shape. So we've got to prepare ourselves to be able to open this up. And then we've got to prepare ourselves to be open through the back of the legs. And then what's happening in the upper back is actually kind of like this. So if you imagine the hands are on the ground and your wrists are flexed, so the palm is wide, and then you're actually kind of broadening the back a little bit, okay? So if you're very, very tight in this area, you're going to restrict yourself from actually getting the hands down to the ground. And that's also going to restrict how high up the back of the arm the inner thigh can get, which is going to mean that you're not going to be quite so strong in that position. Okay, so I like to open up that upper back a little bit. And in pushing the ground away with the hands and rounding the upper back, it automatically fires up this area, ribs draw in towards each other, and the belly draws in towards each other as well. Okay, it draws into center. So you've got that repetition or that feeling of engagement. So things that I like to do to warm up are really just bringing the hands to heart center in a comfortable seat, interlacing the fingers, reaching the fingers forwards. I'm going to whiz around in all directions, rounding the spine by pushing the palms away from center. So that's your broadening of the shoulders, and that's a core engagement aspect here as well. Hands come up to the sky, which reminds us to be long in the spine, and the puffiness of the chest isn't going to happen. We're drawing ribs in, okay? And then what I like to do is just then open up chest. And what I'm doing is open up through the front of the rotator adductor cuffs. So this area is going to be working hard in the shapes to hold us in it. Okay, so stretching and opening that out first. And any kind of forward fold, if we're tight in the hamstrings, or you feel like we're tight in the hamstrings, often it's the QL, the muscle in the lower back, and it attaches into the lower rib, number 12, and attaches into the top of our pelvic bowl. And if that's tight, then it's going to reduce our ability to get into the shape as well. So what can be really nice is just exploring side stretches in the beginning, because you're getting into this area here and finding some freedom. And you can do that 2 or 3 times, or you could do one long hold, and that would work pretty nicely as well. Okay. For the upper back, another thing that I'm really a fan of all the time actually is eagle arms. And again, ribs are drawn in, so it's really broadening shoulder blades, and it just creates some space for us to really get into. Okay, so both directions. And you're lifting up and moving away, elbows from face. Okay, all right. And then a really obvious shape for me is coming into Malasana. And this is true for most of the arm balances, because we want to, first of all, have the hips open. So this takes us straight into the 5 adductor muscles in the inner thigh through the groin. And it gives us this really wonderful opportunity to practice using our arms to open the hips up. Okay, so that's the stretch factor. And then it also gives us the opportunity to squeeze the legs into the arms, which is the strength factor. Okay, so that's really a nice reminder. And for this particular shape, we want to really snuggle in as much as we can. So if I show you from the side, here's your regular Malasana, okay, hip opening. And then I like to really get in and just kind of practice taking the arms out here and squeezing into the back of the arms, okay? So it's a similar sensation to what's going to happen when the legs are extended, okay? So I'm a big fan of putting the body into similar shapes to where we're going to later, so the body doesn't feel like it's completely alien or new when we get there, okay? So with that in mind, keep this shape in your head, and then every time I'm in a standing forward fold, okay, or every time I'm in downward facing dog, I'll walk myself back, take the feet out wide, get long in the spine, and you're using your abdominals, remember, belly drawn in, and I'm going in and I'm bending the knees high and just bringing my arms around and holding the outside of my feet, and I'm squeezing the inside of my thighs into the upper arm, and at the same time I'm getting a really nice release through the back of the legs. Okay, so we call it bug walk, and this is really, really nice. So looks a little bit strange, I know, but every time you're in warrior 2, downward dog, walk yourself back, come into bug walk, and then come forward again. Yeah, and it's a really nice repetition. And I try to sprinkle all of these weird and wonderful things into the journey that we're on to get to where we're going anyway. Okay, so you've got Malasana, you've got the bug walk there. Something that's really nice as well, and it's not everybody's favorite shape, but it's very effective, is lizard. And you can do it with the knee on the ground and the foot out. And you can be starting off with this sensation. So when you're rolling onto the outer edge of the foot, you're opening up inner thigh here. But what is really nice is then leaning in and taking the arm under, and you're squeezing arm and leg against each other. You can even practice taking the hands away from the ground. And I prefer personally to tuck toes under and lift that leg here as well. So this is really nice. And then you're sinking down into it, okay? So lots of different things happening there that can be helpful in your preparation. Every time you're in any kind of forward fold at the top of the mat, lengthening through the back of the legs. And then if you still feel like there's some resistance and some tightness, something that can be really nice to come into is taking one leg out wide, one leg bent. And to begin with, getting into that side body here, remember that some of the muscles that attach into the pelvic bowl, like the hamstrings at the bottom there, if they're tight, they're going to pull on this area as well, and vice versa. So going in this direction, 5 breaths maybe, and then leaning forward, coming into this direction. And it gives you a good amount of sensation through the adductor muscles and the inner thigh here. So obviously then doing that with both legs, okay? So those are a few things to think about to get into it. And sun salutations are going to be really nice to just open up and find some heat around the joints as well, because you really need to be warm in this shape to get into it. So I'm going to show you some easier ways to get into it in a moment, and a lot of those naturally progress on from what I was just talking about. I say it every week, but there are 6 main foundations that we're thinking about when we're coming into arm balances, or from my perspective anyway. First foundation, or first element, is the foundation of the hands. So I don't think I can say it enough. You want to be pushing down through the heel of the hand here, each of the bases of the fingers, the knuckles, the fingertips. And you can get nice and wide with the fingers, so as wide as you can here. And you're pushing down through the whole of the hand. So that's your foundations. And the more you can spread that, more you're engaging the muscles in the arms. And the more you're spreading the load, so it doesn't just go down into the wrist itself or the heel of the hand. Adduction is the second element. So that's the idea of drawing the legs into center. Okay, so abduction is where, when we're standing, we're taking the leg out to the side, and adduct is bringing into midline. So abduct, adduct. Okay, so these two muscles work against each other and together. And what we want to be doing is getting the legs used to squeezing into the midline. Okay, I'll give another tip on that in a moment. And the core. So I'm often talking about the core, and I can easily say to you, engage your Mula Bandha and Uddiyana Bandha. But what I mean by that is I'm drawing the belly in and I'm lifting up. So it's a feeling of transverse abdominis, so the deeper core muscles engaging, which fires up multifidus in the spine, which keeps that whole column of the spine nice and strong and protected. And then belly lifting up just fires up around here as well, so Uddiyana. So we're rooting and lifting, yeah, rooting in, lifting up. And all of these things are happening at the same time, remember. And then spine is long. So it's really a long spine. Collarbone is as broad as it can be until that moment when you're coming into this shape with the upper back, okay? And then we're lowering the hips. So remember I said in crow we're tilting forward. This one we're tilting back, which you'll see in action in a moment, okay? And then really looking forward. In my experience, if we look down, it's where we fall down. If in Firefly we look behind us, we're going to fall behind us. So we want to be looking straight forward in Firefly. Okay. So let me show you how the shape looks. But just before I forget, I've been giving lots of tips recently on how to get the inner thigh fired up. And if you check on Instagram, the last 2 days, I've done 2 posts one after the other with some tips on how to engage the inner thigh, which will be a really good practice for you coming into this kind of arm balance. So if you're someone that has trouble with keeping the legs on the arms, try some of the tips that I've put in the Instagram page, and they'll be really, really handy. Okay, so let's just pause a moment. I'm going to see if anyone has any questions. So if you've got some questions and you want me to answer them, type them in and then I'll come back. Okay, it can look like a complicated shape, and it is. I'm not trying to belittle it, but it's one of those shapes that when you set yourself up with the right prepared nature with the body, and when you know how to fire up the different muscles and in the right order, and how to place the bones around the other bones with that muscle engagement, and you clear your mind of the I can't do it mentality, we start to make progressive steps forward with it. Okay, so try as much as you can when you're practicing these things to keep it really lighthearted, keep it playful. It's almost like the yoga mat's your playground, and there's never any judgment. And actually, my biggest learnings have been from falling down in these shapes, because that's where you learn what the tipping point is. And that's when you know you kind of have the Goldilocks effect. So a little bit too much this way makes me fall. A little bit too much this way makes me fall. So somewhere between here and here is that perfect balance. Okay, so this is what we're trying to keep in our mind, that open mind. I use blocks for my hands. My wrists are a bit sensitive at the moment. So this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to show you from an angle, so hopefully you can see easily. I'm coming into Melasana actually to begin with, and I almost start sitting on the blocks. Here's a nice starting point. Chest is nice and broad, spine is nice and long, belly's drawn in and up, my hands are ready, they're wide, okay? Inner thighs are already squeezing in. And then what I'm going to do, belly's drawn in and up, I'm lifting my hips and I'm coming into that kind of bug walk I told you about. And I'm taking my arms as far under as I can, really as far in as I can. Blocks are going to be behind me. Some of you won't need blocks. Fingers to the ground. And what I want you to notice is I have to sit back to get into it. So my hands are not flat to the ground yet. I can only get the heel of my hand down. If you look, it's still up. It gets down as I lean back, okay? So I go from here to here. And that's the bit when a lot of people will start to feel like they're falling and then they stop themselves. And that's the bit where you need to just get past that, okay? So just try it. Try it and see. So here's what it looks like, okay? I'm coming in, arms under, blocks behind. I'm resting that big femur bone on the back of my arms, and then I'm looking forward. And my feet walk towards me, and if you can see my collarbone's nice and broad. And what happens by just simply squeezing the legs into the arms, pushing the ground away with the hands, is that the feet tend to float. I like to flex my feet, so toes point towards me. And then I'm still squeezing legs into arms, still squeezing, but I'm reaching the legs away. And then when I get to a good point of balance, whee, I'm gonna fall, okay? Then I start to point the toes. And you can lean down, whee, and that's the worst that's gonna happen. Yeah, you're gonna literally land on your bottom, which has got lots of padding anyway, okay, which is the good thing. So let me just run you through a few tips. And I see people practicing like this a lot. So sitting on a block and taking the feet out wide, sitting up tall. And the biggest thing to practice is belly in and up, okay? So that's strong foundations, legs wide, spine long, leaning forward, which requires the belly to help you, leaning forward, and then taking the arms under the legs, okay? And just squeezing legs into arms. So this is a good practice here. You can then put the hands onto the ground and your bottom's still on the floor and you're walking your feet in towards center and hands walk in towards center. And then all you're doing is sitting on the block, squeezing legs into arms, and you can play around with practicing extending, okay? Legs one at a time, belly's still strong, collarbone is broad, and then you can also practice taking both legs out. So it's the same shape, okay, except your hands are on the floor. Hands would be forwards otherwise. And that's a really nice way to strengthen up the quads, check in with how the hamstrings are doing, practice the shape itself. And it gives you the sensation, because you're in that angle downwards, of being in the pose, okay? So that's a really nice way to begin, okay? And I want to just play around with leg over arm pose as a preparation, because I really think this is handy. One leg is out ahead of you, picking the knee up and taking the foot. You can play around with just external rotation or flossing of the hip here if you wish. And then you're going to lift the foot up, lean in and under, and you're putting the shoulder like a backpack strap over your arm. It's not going to stay on the shoulder, so it will slide down a little. And you're reaching the heel towards the back of the thigh. So you're kind of practicing being here. And then what I like to do is put the hands on the ground, same as we did with the block, really. Still practicing squeezing the leg in, and then just practicing extending one leg up. Sensation is exactly the same, minus the core effort and the stress on the wrists, okay? So that's another way to practice. And then let me take you through what we did last week. So those of you who don't need blocks, you'll just imagine the blocks are not there, right? Okay. My wrists are very tender after having a little baby. All right, so the shape we did last week is a progression. It's an introductory step into where we're going with Firefly. So I'm just going to go over that again now. Setup is the same. I start sitting on the block, just comfortable for me. Legs are out wide. I'm lifting the bum up. I'm lifting the hips up, And I'm taking myself into that bug walk, okay, where I'm lifting the hips up nice and high. And I'm taking the blocks back, fingers down. Look, you can see the knuckles are on the ground, but the heel of the hand isn't until I look forward, okay? So as soon as I look forward, there I am. Legs are resting on the arms. There's a little bend in the arms. And I'm, first of all, practicing just squeezing, bringing the soles of the feet in together. And then if that works, I'm going to practice crossing the ankles in each direction. And this is really nice for just training the adductor muscles to fire up. And then if all of those things feel easy, I like to start with a flexed foot. Can keep one leg in and extend one leg out. Bring the leg back in, whee, still squeezing. Extending one leg and then bringing back in, okay? And then whee, lowering down. So that can be a really nice preparation. Just bringing the soles of the feet together, activating and getting used to using the inner thigh muscle. And then that idea of squeezing in, but literally the arms or the legs, if you want to think about it like that, I'm squeezing, if these were my legs, squeezing the inner thighs in, and that helps me to extend the legs. Personally, I point the toes towards me to begin with, because that works with the muscles on the front of the shin, which then helps with the muscles on the quad, which crosses over the knee to straighten the leg out, okay? I feel like if I point my toes away, it doesn't work in the same way. And then I point the toes right at the end, okay? So that's an option to practice. And then I'm talking nonstop. So if you have questions, get typing and I'll answer them. Another thing is lying on your back, okay? And you can start with the legs up high, and then you can take the legs wide, toes reaching towards you, so you've got the quads engaged. And then what I like to do is just set myself up on the floor. And I'm taking my hands and reaching the palms up to the sky. And I'm lifting the hands up, lifting my head, neck, and shoulders, and lifting my lower back from the ground, okay, or my hips. And then I'm just practicing holding that. Okay, that's to begin with. So legs and arms not engaged at this point. Just working with core and that feeling of rounding upper back and bringing legs forward. And then once that feels comfortable, you can lift up even more and practice squeezing inner thighs in towards the back of the arms, right? So it's just putting it in different directions and thinking about how you can find similar ways or simpler ways to get into it in different directions. So you're training the muscles to be able to get used to getting to more complex places later. Okay, hopefully that makes sense. Now, you don't need to be able to reach your toes to be able to get into the shape. So you don't need to have the strap in any way for this at all. But what you can do is really, really focus on sitting legs wide. And honestly, I really feel like when you sit in wide leg forward fold or dandasana, pointing the toes towards you to get used to firing up the quad muscles and lifting the heels off is really going to give you the sensation in the legs and as well as the added bonus for the inner thigh. And then just practicing Tadasana on the mat. Toes point towards you, you sit up nice and tall, ribs in, it's nice, strong, solid lines. And this is giving you the power feeling that you need. And at the same time, there's information happening in between the thighs, so the adductors are firing up. And you could even take it further, put a block or a tennis ball in between the thighs in Tadasana, in Dandasana. And you're squeezing in the thighs against the block and engaging quads, getting used to the feeling there as well, okay? All right, so those are a few easier ways to get into it. That's the shape itself. And then taking it further, let me show you some things that people can practice once they've mastered the shape, okay? So let's come into the shape itself. I'll just refresh you. I'm starting in a malasana, okay? Lifting the bum, lifting the hips, taking the arms under as far as I can, so that bug walk sensation and lifting. Hands go back. I'm using blocks. You don't have to, remember. I'm looking forward at this point, because if I look back, nothing's going to happen. Heels come down as soon as I lower the bottom, and I'm walking the feet in. And then I'm flexing my feet, squeezing the thighs in, reaching the legs away. And then something that I'm working with is coming to crow pose with the back leg. So you can see then front leg is in firefly, back leg is in crow pose, okay? So it's transitioning, and then you can play around with doing that in both directions. So let me show you firefly one more time. Coming into the shape itself, hands come down, hips rest on the back of the arms. There's a bend in the elbows to begin with, looking forward because that's where we're going. Squeezing the feet away from the ground, squeezing in the thighs in towards each other. That's my preparation. And keeping the toes pointing towards me, pushing the ground away with the blocks, squeezing, squeezing. Belly is in and up, legs are out wide. That's the shape. When I feel like I'm in a good position, I point the toes. Looks pretty, but I prefer flexed feet personally. And then if I'm going into crow pose, I'm working with this position and then transitioning from here and playing around with going between the two, okay? So there's lots of fun to be had with the shape. And I feel like once you master that fear of being able to sit back and really making it that position and looking forward, it's going to fill you up with a lot of confidence to make the more playful shapes later, the transitions, okay? So it's a really nice thing to practice. And if you're newer to this and this feels like a big shape and you're not so keen to try, go back through. I've saved all of the videos on the Facebook page and also on the Instagram stories. Sorry, not stories, Instagram Live. So you can work your way through the progression and just see how it feels. Practice going forwards, practice going backwards. And then we get to the point where we can add in all of those fun transitions as well, okay? Does anyone have any questions? Any more questions? I've answered some of the Instagram questions as I've gone through by showing you different tips and things. So hopefully that has helped. Okay, cool. All right, well, have fun playing. Take your time, warm the body up properly, some sun salutations, and then weave those shapes in that I talked about at the beginning so that your body feels really nice and warm. Maybe even consider some of the cool down shapes before you actually get into this, okay? And then, yeah, warm the body up properly. Have fun, okay? Any questions, send me messages. Any requests for things for the next couple of weeks as well, feel free to send me messages. I'm really happy to share as much as I can. All right, thanks for joining, guys. Take care.